there is a big problem behind all this behavior that we have seen. How is possible to do this without a brain? We need to wait until 1880 when this big man, Charles Darwin, published a wonderful, astonishing book that it's a revolution. The title is The Power of Movement in Plants. No one was allowed to speak about movement in plants before Charles Darwin. In this book, assisted by his son Francis, that was the first professor of plant physiology in the world in Cambridge, they took in consideration every single movement for 500 pages. And in the last paragraph of the book, that it's a kind of stylistic mark, because normally Charles Darwin stored in the last paragraph of a book the most important message. He wrote that it's hardly an exaggeration to say that the tip of the radical acts like the brain of one of the lower animals. This is not a metaphor. He wrote some very interesting letter to one of his friends that was J.D. Hooker, at that time president of the Royal Society, so the maximum scientific authority in Britain, speaking about the brain in the plants. Now, this is a root apex growing against a slope. So you can recognize this kind of movement. The same movement that worms, snake, and every animals that are moving on the ground without legs, it's able to display. And it's not an easy movement, because to have this kind of movement, you need to move different regions of the roots and to synchronize this different region without having a brain. So we studied the root apex, and we found that there is a specific region that is here depicted in blue that is called the transition zone. And this region, it's a very small region. It's less than 1 millimeters. And in this small region, you have the highest consumption of oxygen in the plants, and more important, you have this kind of signals here. The signals that you are seeing here are action potential, are the same signals that the neurons of my brain, of our brain, it's used to exchange information. Now, we know that a root apex have just a few hundred cells that show this kind of feature. But we know how big is the root apparatus of a small plant, like a plant of rye. We have almost 14 million of roots. We have almost 11.5 million of root apex, and a total length of 600 and more kilometers and a very high surface area. Now let's imagine that each single root apex is working in network with all the others. Here we have on the left internet, and on the right the root apparatus. They work in the same way. They are a network of small computing machine working in networks. And why they are so similar? Because they evolved for the same reason, to survive predation. It's the same, they work in the same way, so you can remove 90% of the root apparatus and the plants follow to work. You can remove 90% of the internet and it is following to work. So a suggestion for the people working with networks. Plants are able to give you good suggestion about to evolve networks. And another possibility is a technological possibility. Let's imagine that we can build robots, and robots that are inspired by plants. Until now, the man was inspired just by the man or by the animals in producing a robot. We have the animaloid, and the normal robots inspired by animals, insectoid, and so on. We have the androids that are inspired by the man. But why we have not any plantoid? Well, if you want to fly, it's good that you look at the bird to be inspired by bird. But if you want to explore soils, or if you want to colonize new territory, the best thing that you can do is to be inspired by plants that are master in doing this. We have another possibility. We are working in our lab, is to build hybrids. It's much more easy to build hybrids. Hybrids means something that is half living and half machine, It's much more easy to work with plants than with animals. They have computing power, they have electrical signals. The connection with the machine is much more easy, much more even ethically possible. And these are three possibilities that we are working on to build hybrids driven by algae or by the leaves, and at the end, by the most powerful part of the plants, by the root.